This is episode number 171 with Connor Young.
Reach your full potential. Reach your full potential. Small win, small win, small win. Keep your momentum going.
The Success 101 Podcast.
Welcome to the Success 101 Podcast. This is your host, Jared Warren. At each episode, my goal is to bring you a new concept or idea to help you maximize your full potential. Thanks for joining me here today. Now let's kick things off. Oh, hey guys, welcome back. Please forgive me for slurping. I normally don't do that, but I've got to tell you guys about this super delicious meal replacement shake that we're going to talk through today that's just going to blow your mind. You've got to have it for breakfast and maybe even lunch and maybe even dinner. I can't wait to tell you about this. Now, before we dive into that and while we're here today, I want to mention to you guys that my team still has my book, From Success to Significance, offered for just the shipping cost if you're in the United States. For those of you listening in outside of the United States, you can grab the ebook reader just as easily. Just head over to my website, success101podcast.com/the-book to grab your own copy. Again, in the US, you're only going to pay the shipping cost for that. And there's many of you who have written in about the benefits this book is bringing you, how it's really molding and shaping your 2017, and I couldn't be more thrilled. That's why I wanted to create this book and get it into as many of your hands as we could. That's why I told my team to offer it for free. Lives are being changed. Habits and goal-setting systems are being molded and shaped as you guys create an incredible 2017, going through the 6 vision-building exercises and the 5 components for creating your strategy. I'll be doing more episodes on this as I go through the segment-by-segment breakdown of this book. And for those of you who have copies of the books in your hands, you've been able to follow along. And it's been so much fun hearing your feedback as you listen into some of the live episodes. And thanks also to many of you who have been scanning in the worksheets out of that book, where you're writing down your to-be list, your highlight reel, all of the things that I've been going through on some of the live episodes. It's been so much fun to walk through that with you guys. So again, grab your copy at success101podcast.com/the-book. Both the paperback version that's being offered for just the shipping cost and the ebook reader can both be found there. And I want you guys to all get your hands on this. Now, another thing that I'm really excited about that some of you have been writing in about as you've heard bits and pieces of it through my Instagram stories or Snapchat is this epic, amazing podcast that I'm putting together notes for right now, which I'm starting to realize might have to be a 2-part podcast episode because of the notes that I've compiled on it so far and how deep these notes go into really just what fuels me every day. The rituals, the habits, the morning and evening routines. So many of you have heard me mention things here and there on different podcasts for different reasons. And I've realized for a lot of you, it's going to be helpful to pull all of that together. What supplements am I taking? What do I use at night to help get amazing sleep like I've never done before in my life? What am I doing during meditation? What time hacks am I implementing to make my day freaking amazing when it comes to rocking out productivity? And maybe most importantly, what am I doing in spare time or time that I've built in for think time to really gain an edge from a peak performance standpoint? I'm bringing all that to you guys here in the next few weeks. Thanks so much for being patient as I compile that and put it together. It's not just something I just want to throw together quickly based on what I do each day. I really want to put the notes together on this in a detailed way where you see the benefits of it. That'll be coming up soon, so stay tuned here at the Success 101 Podcast. Now, on to our amazing show today. And I've got to tell you guys, as I mentioned earlier, this is super delicious. It's something you're going to want to have for breakfast and lunch and maybe in between. One bottle of this stuff is going to make you feel amazing, but if you integrate this into your daily habits and rituals, your body and most importantly, your brain will be firing on all cylinders. Now, let's take a time out. I know what you're probably thinking. Another protein shake, another meal replacement, another green juice supplement. No, because I can promise you, you haven't seen anything like this. I test everything that comes across my plate before I endorse it or sponsor it. And I can assure you, this meal replacement blend is like no other. You're going to hear from Connor Young today, the creator of Ample Meal. And the reason this is so awesome, guys, is because of the incredible, precise mechanics behind the design of not only the most choice ingredients, but the chemistry behind how those ingredients are going to give you what you need each day. Check this out. It's made up of 25% carbohydrates, 26% protein, and 49% healthy fat. And if you think through it and you know anything about those types of percentages as it relates to a meal replacement drink, this is really important because there's not another meal supplement that I know of out there that has such a high amount of protein coupled with an incredibly high amount of good quality fats. I could go on, but I'm going to let Connor do that in our episode today. It's soy-free, gluten-free, GMO-free, no artificial flavors or any of that crap you don't want out there. And you can even choose a 400 or 600 calorie size bottle. It's customized for you. You can add water or milk, shake it up, and enjoy. It simply is one of the most unique meal replacement blends that I know out there. So here's what I want you guys to do. After you hear the podcast today, if you're compelled, which I know you will be, to go grab your own, go to success101podcast.com/ample. Again, AMPLE. Pick the size that you want, and at checkout, enter code success101 to grab 15% off of your order. Again, that's success101podcast.com/ample, and use code success101 to grab your 15% off. I think you guys are going to love this. I've done the testing on it so that you don't have to. And this meal replacement drink is certainly in a class of its own. So without any further delay, let's jump right into my deep dive conversation on this stuff with the one and only Connor Young. Connor Young, welcome to the Success 101 podcast. So excited to have you on. How are things in your world today, buddy?
Dude, they're awesome. Just got back a little 4th of July camping trip, so feeling refreshed. It's all good. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard about your story and about the product just through my friend Mark Devine, who I know you guys are closely connected, and he spoke a lot about your product on the episode that I had with him. And I thought, well, if Mark's doing it, of course, and he puts that much faith in it, I've got to get Connor on, and started looking up some stuff on you. And it's just amazing the story that you have around, the new fitness brand you have called Ample. And like I said, Mark brought this up to me, and whenever he said, I'll have an Ample in the morning. And I actually thought for probably a 2 or 3 minute stretch of our podcast, he said, I have an apple. And I'm like, man, this dude is grinding it out on an apple every morning. He corrected me very quickly and said, no, Ample. And I'm like, well, I've never heard of that. What is that? So that's how we came across your product. But I'm sure we'll get into some of the market testing of the product. And before we dive into all of that, let's take a big step back. Let's figure out who you are here for my listeners who maybe haven't heard of you before we dive into Ample. What makes you tick and thrive and all of those sort of things, and how you got to where you are today. And then we'll get on into the creation of this, what seemingly looks like a great, great product that I'm excited about.
Thanks so much. Yeah, so I guess the way that I usually describe myself is a bio nerd, where, since I was 17 years old, I've been very interested in figuring out how the human body works. Well, part of it has been, from selfishness, in the sense that when I was in high school, I was the skinny nerd, and I did wrestling, I did tennis, and I knew I basically wanted to put on some pounds. So I got into nutrition from that perspective. But then when I was actually in college, I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. Understanding how the human body works. So I basically did effectively a pre-med track, knowing I would never want to be a doctor, but I was just fascinated with medicine, with biology. So that basically meant I was a biology major. Now, I got into CrossFit during my second year of school. And, immediately I was hooked. This was back in 2009, I think, before it really had kind of taken off. And it was just some really, really niche thing that only a few people were doing online. And so it was amazing. And like overnight, I became effectively the biggest brand ambassador or cult leader for CrossFit. And, to the annoyance of most of my friends who were like, oh my God, would you just shut up? But it was perfect. So I was effectively synonymous with CrossFit. And so my friend and I created the St. Olaf College CrossFit Club. That was back in Minnesota, where I'm from. It was all about, for me in college and afterwards, it was all about how can I improve both my physical performance, but also my mental performance. So I kind of got into the whole biohacking thing before it had the term. So you've probably heard of the whole Uberman sleep schedule, where you're, seemingly going to be sleeping for 20 minutes every 4 hours to try to hack sleep. I tried that. It ended quite disastrously, but
yeah. In fact, it's funny you brought that up. I recently saw that just this past week. I was traveling in Colorado, reading through Tools of Titans, and that's the first time that I saw that phrase and that idea mentioned. And it was like, it's somebody, I'm blanking now, whoever created or helped co-create WordPress did that over a 2-year period. And I was like, holy cow, how does that work? Like you said, it ends disastrously. I would think that would be the case with most people who try that.
Yes. To actually live on 2 hours of sleep a day I mean, you'd expect that is so, I guess you could say, like crazy and ridiculous, that if it actually did work for the vast majority of people who tried it, or even really a small percentage, it would be a heck of a lot more popular than it actually is. So I got into health, nutrition, fitness, then immediately started a CrossFit gym out of school. And it was amazing. I got a chance to kind of take people from where they were to significantly, higher from both a physical performance, but also a longevity perspective. So we were very much an all-encompassing gym where we really did focus on nutrition and physical therapy and sleep and basically all-around well-being. So we did this for a little bit, and I actually sold the gym. Wanted to do something a little bit more that scaled, but I also wanted to see the medical industry because I was still fascinated in how that worked. So I actually started selling medical devices for Johnson & Johnson. With that job, I was able to go into surgery, and basically what you do is you'd go into an operating room setting and you'd have a device. You'd have like an endo cutter. The surgeon is using this device to take out cancer from the body, whether it's colon cancer or lung cancer or whatever. And so you're going into this operation and basically instructing the doctor and the rest of the surgical staff how to use the device intraoperatively. It was both a really cool opportunity. I mean, in the course of the 2 years I worked for J&J, I was able to be in and take part of about 1,000 surgeries, but also massively depressing. I very soon became jaded with the medical industry in the sense that I felt like the majority of the issues that we were seeing, 90% of the cases were lifestyle induced, where if the person had just eaten a correct diet or exercised, then they wouldn't have to have a gastric bypass at the age of 35.
Right.
And so at the time I was actually working for Johnson & Johnson at the Cleveland Clinic, then said, hey, I need to do something that scales and also that fixes the problem on the front end. So I actually moved out to San Francisco, landed the startups so I could create a physical therapy patient engagement platform. It was basically the startup that was intended to increase the frequency and basically the compliance of people who were doing physical therapy workouts. The problem, of course, is that there's not a lot of money in the preventative side of wellness. And so although the product was actually pretty good, it didn't make any money. So eventually I went back to the drawing board. To kind of give you a brief context of where I was living at the time, to get into the startup world, I said, hey, I'm going to just dive straight in by actually moving into an entrepreneurial house. Basically, this was a house in San Francisco with 50 people, all of whom were either they were starting their businesses or they were working for other startups. And everyone was very much in the same mindset that I was, trying to live their best lives, be hyper productive in business, but also in life. Of course, I came in and I was coaching CrossFit on the side still, and very much at this point had probably read around 200 or 300 clinical journals on nutrition. I was the resident health expert, and all these guys who were very, very motivated to improve their lives came to me to fix their various problems, to help them work out or help their diet or just make sure that they actually had enough energy in the middle of a busy day to sustain the output cognitively that they needed to perform well in their jobs. Whether it's the food industry or the supplement industry, is that we're all taking various supplements or various food because we've been told, hey, carbs spike insulin, or hey, protein is good because of muscles, but it doesn't really get anything more deeper than that. The reason why I was fascinated with biology itself is because this is the underlying context for how everything works. Instead of just having, which is what most people have, basically a set of trivia, they have just a variety of facts that are just lodged in their head about here's how to gain muscle or lose fat or have more energy. And it's basically, this ingredient or this supplement does this one thing, but that's not really how your body works. If you really want to maximize how your body works, I think it's essential to understand the underlying processes that make that ingredient do what it's supposed to do. Because if we were to understand how inflammation or gut microbiome or even how your body from a biological perspective works, then you're arming yourself with the fundamental processes that'll give you the heuristics to make decisions for yourself. So you don't have to just trust any sort of, whether it's a food company or your body, you can actually have a much better and robust framework for making decisions on a daily basis that are really based in science. And these guys who are very, very smart were coming to me saying, hey, is this or that food good for me? I'm like, honestly, no. And so I actually started a nutrition course for them, and then also cooking classes, but nothing seemed to really work until one of my friends said, Connor, honestly, if you don't believe in any of these food companies, why don't you just make one? And I resisted for months until he's like, Connor, dude, I'm actually sick. He developed this thing called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth as a result of basically, eating a bunch of processed, carbs and just really, really unhealthy ingredients. He comes to me saying, Connor, I'll literally pay you to make something better. And at that point, I was like, all right, fine. Nutrition does need to be fixed. And if I don't respect many of the food companies in the world right now, I may as well try to make something that's significantly better. And that's kind of when the concept of Ample started.
Man, that's so great. Thanks so much for filling in the blanks there. Since we've mentioned this idea of Ample so much and how you got there, I want to just go ahead and dive on in because I know we'll run out of time here if we don't. Sure. But, I'm looking here at the nutritional profile that I've got pulled up in front of me here. You've got, and I'll hit the high points here and let you dive a little bit deeper, but you've got quality protein, you've got healthy fats, fiber and prebiotics, you've got plant-based micronutrients, very limited carbohydrates, but you have to have some of those in there, right, to really get some of the energy and activity levels up. But a lot of this is grass-fed. It's just super great, high-quality ingredients that you've got here. How did the philosophy of all that come together? Just what was going on in your mind and what was going on with the product at the same time during development that led to this final product that we now know as Ample today?
Sure. So, if you were to look at Ample, there's effectively, I guess you could call it, 6-ish components to it. There's the proteins, there's the healthy fats, there's the carbohydrates, the plant-based micronutrients, the pre and probiotics, the fiber and prebiotics, and then also the probiotics. And, like I had mentioned before, part of it is about getting enough of the raw substrates in your body, but also part of it is, how do you reduce inflammation, maximize gut microbiome function, and then also basically just make sure that your mitochondria are functioning, correctly. I guess I'll just start out with the proteins here. So, how do you create a good protein blend? Well, one way that you need to make sure that your proteins are, created is that they should be complete. So what this means is basically there's 9 essential amino acids. And, now when some of these, if you ever have gotten a whey protein or whatever, it might list off 20 different amino acids, which is true. I mean, that's what our body uses. However, 9 are essential in the sense that your body can't make them. You have to obtain them through dietary sources. And the way that we generally measure that is with this thing called a PDCAAS score. So protein direct digestibility corrected amino acid score. And so if something has a PDCAAS of 1, then it means it's a complete protein. So things like whey protein, things like egg protein, these actually have a PDCAAS of 1. So does collagen. So I said, hey, let's look at the proteins in the human body and let's try to emulate what that would look like by getting, all of these sufficient amino acids that are also bioavailable. So if you look at whey protein, for instance, it actually does have all of these. And so this is one of the reasons why we put it in there, but it also had to be really, really high quality. So it's very important to have it be grass-fed whey. And so that's how the whey protein came in there. But of course, what I also wanted to make sure is I'm assuming that a lot of your listeners are familiar with some of the philosophies of, I guess you could call it paleo, which is that a lot of our ancestors used to eat things that weren't necessarily where we wouldn't eat it now. So for instance, we don't eat a lot of organ meats or other types of meat. We almost always exclusively eat the muscle itself. And so what's unfortunate is that we end up losing some of these amino acids that are more prevalent in things like, organ meat or whatever. And so this is why it was important for me to add collagen into the mix here as well, because collagen is really high in alanine, glycine, and proline, which are sort of the main components that make up elastin, which is basically there for joint and skin development.
I'm surprised you don't see collagen used in more stuff nowadays. I mean, it's just such a valuable, for lack of better word, just a valuable nutrient there that does so many things for our bodies. And you just don't, you see it in a few things out there, the higher quality stuff like yours, for example, but you just don't see it in a ton of stuff out there. What was it that led you to want to include that collagen of all the things you could have added in?
Well, for me, for the most part, it was simply the fact that I knew that we needed enough glycine. Glycine is generally the amino acid that's limited when the body is creating elastin. And so I was looking for things that added that. And so naturally it was either going to be collagen or it was going to be gelatin. And so collagen, grass-fed collagen from a very high-quality source was the reason why. There's also a lot of people who use bone broth now for partly the same reason.
Yep.
And so, totally a viable option as well. But we wanted to make sure that it was, in powder form that, didn't require you to mix, ample with bone broth. The other thing as well is that when we're thinking about the goal of ample, part of it is actually to maintain fullness, to actually make the person feel full. Otherwise, you can have the amount of nutrients, but the pressure on your stomach doesn't send a signal to your brain to say, hey, you can stop eating. And it actually creates this, it means that the feeling of hunger is still there.
Correct.
One of the ways you can do this is actually by increasing the thickness or the viscosity. What we actually have as well is pea protein. One, because we wanted a vegetarian protein, but the second reason is because the pea protein itself adds to the thickness of ample. So it's those three proteins that make up ample currently. But I also step back to say the entire formula right now is a process, right? Where we're always going to be on the forefront of science. And if at one point it turns out that there's actually a different protein or a different fat or micronutrient or whatever that adds to the goal of making this optimally nutritious, we have no reason to not change. So it's a totally iterative and adaptive formula. And I think that's one of the key cornerstones that makes ample ample.
Yeah, I've had others out there that did not leave you full. I won't name names, but they were claimed to be a full meal replacement, whatever, but they just didn't have the sustenance in there to keep you from feeling hungry after a short period of time.
Well, I mean, that's the thing where, one of the reasons why we called it ample was because I said, well, there's a lot of these, quote unquote meal replacements out there that have 170 calories, and it's basically a way to calorically restrict the diet. But my philosophy, it's not about restricting calories. It's about getting the right calories and making every single calorie count. So this is why we have enough of everything. So in a 400 calorie version, we still have 25 grams of protein. Or in a 600 calorie version, we have 37 grams of protein, which is just as much, if not more, than most protein shakes, except it also has the healthy fats, the carbs, the probiotics and prebiotics.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So then we get to the fats. And I think that the fats themselves were the ones that I really wanted to make sure to get right. And actually, that's the hardest to get. And I'll mention why it's actually hard. Because, well, when you have something that's powder, so ample comes as powder in a bottle and you put water or milk in it and then you shake it up and drink. Fats, as you know, or a lot of oils, they actually, at room temperature, they're liquid. So you say, well, how do you get liquid to be solid at room temperature? What you do is you spray it. Think of it like a perfume bottle, right? You spray it in little teeny microscopic droplets of this oil are sprayed onto a substrate that is either a protein or a carbohydrate, and that allows basically the protein and the fat, or the carbohydrate and the fat, to be solid. Now, problem, however, is that the entire food industry has, it seems like, been kind of oblivious to what they use as this binder. And so most people are using, GMO corn maltodextrin when they're spraying these oils onto them. And for me, that is too low of a quality of carbohydrate to spray against. So we've actually had to get customized blends of every single one of our lipids, such that it's on non-GMO tapioca, but it's also, there's a significantly less amount of carbohydrates there. So the standard is 50-50 carbs to fat. But in this case, with ours, we're able to develop 70-30, so that 70% of the total grams in this fat blend is fat, and only 30% is carbohydrates, which is significantly better than most other products out there, which I'm really excited about.
That's huge. And that's why I mentioned earlier, you've got the high fats in there to a pretty optimal level, but then you've got very low amount of carbs. I think what most people are doing out there, if I had to guess, is just going for maybe less quality, the faster, cheaper type route to get, that label on there to say, look, we've got this inside of our drink or inside of our, formula, but it's just really not quality going into your body.
Exactly. Or it's like the fats themselves are quality, but it comes along with all these other low quality things as well. So, I mean,
right, like a 50-50 blend, as you mentioned, which is not great.
No, it's not. I mean, and nutrition is just as much about what goes into your body as what is not in the product. So we know we need healthy fats, of course, because our brain, our every single cell in the human body is made up from basically a fatty acid membrane. And so it's very important to have basically a comprehensive blend of lipids. So this is why we have saturated and monounsaturated and omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids. And so we get the saturated fats from coconut, which has a significant amount of MCTs as well. And for a lot of your audience, I'm sure I'm sure a lot of your audience is familiar with MCTs, but I will go into it. MCTs are basically, they're called medium chain triglycerides that allow your body to basically absorb them quicker. And they're converted to these things called ketones that act as brain and muscle energy in a way that's more efficient and effective than glucose is, delivering energy without the hormone response of actually, triggering insulin. And so this is why, a lot of people are using MCTs these days. But what's important, for Ample is that as a comprehensive fatty acid blend, that we also have long chain triglycerides, and we also have the monounsaturated and all these other things as well. So we have coconut oil. We also have macadamia nut oil, chia seed for the omega-3s, and then sunflower lecithin for the omega-6s. And what's interesting about sunflower lecithin as well is that it actually provides a significant amount of a nutrient called choline. And choline is actually important for your body to create acetylcholine, which you may recognize as a neurotransmitter, similar to dopamine or serotonin. This is why we have these four fats that are in Ample in a relatively significant amount. So you may actually even look at the nutrition fact and be like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of fat. Yes, it is. And that's on purpose.
Yeah, and it's awesome. I had Ann-Louise Gettleman on my podcast several episodes ago where she was talking about just the fat craze that is going on now that's been, talked about by those in the know for years and years when people just thought it was nuts and, why fat? Why are we talking about fat? And she talked a ton about sunflower lecithin and what that produces. And there's just a lot of information over there for listeners who want to go hear about that. That's going to lead to why this Ample drink that you've created here is really setting itself apart. Just little key components like that. And I say little not to minimize it because I know it's hard to get all of this stuff in there and formulate it the right way, but just little things like that make such a big difference. And you're just not finding that out there in other drinks nowadays or any nutritional supplements as well.
It's the details that do count, but it's like 100 small details that end up being a large detail at the end. And so one of the things, though, that I think that people are still, I guess you could say, I don't want to say neglecting, but maybe that not as much focus is put on them, is fiber and prebiotics. So we know now, for instance, that that gut microbiome is incredibly important for basically all aspects of health. So in short, the gut microbiome is basically the 3 pounds of microbes or bacteria that are in your large intestine, primarily. There's also microbes in every other part of your body, small intestine, mouth, skin. But I want to focus on the large intestine because that's where primarily most of them are. And that's a lot of the signaling that happens in your body. So, for instance, these microbes can actually act as modulators between the brain and the gut, and as well as the gut and the immune system. Maximizing your gut health through the microbiome is actually one of the best ways to improve immunity, reduce things like autoimmunity or inflammatory issues, to make sure that you're digesting and you're getting in the right nutrients, because these bacteria also help digest your nutrients for you. And so feeding this microbiome is actually critical. And if you were to, for instance, look at people at other ancestors, you'd see that generally the amount of sugar in our diet is significantly higher than it was back in a Paleolithic era, but also the amount of fiber in our diet is significantly lower. This unfortunately means that our microbes are actually not getting the fuel that they need. They are not getting the diversity and also the amount of fiber to properly metabolize. And so this is why we as Westerners have actually a relatively low amount of biodiversity within the gut. So from our perspective, as when we make Ample, it's to say, how do we get more microbiome diversity? And that's basically reflective of the amount of fiber and prebiotics that we have and the types. This is why we have 4 types of fiber, and they come from organic psyllium husk, which is basically a soluble fiber. There's also acacia fiber and organic Jerusalem artichoke inulin, as well as green banana resistant starch. Now, you may be familiar with a couple of those, but basically the reasons why we have different fibers there is because digest different bacteria. So, for instance, green banana resistant starch is actually metabolized by different microbes than is psyllium husk. If you think about all four of these, it basically helps to maintain this gut microbiome. And so each one of these, soluble, insoluble, resistant starch, and fructooligosaccharides have actually been shown to improve biodiversity in the gut microbiome. And we have a significant amount of at least 10 grams of them in a 400 calorie version and 12 grams in a 600 calorie. So I'm actually really excited about how that part of the formula has kind of evolved over time to be what it is right now. So that's the fiber and the prebiotics. But what's also interesting is that I wouldn't necessarily say that we need probiotics. Well, we shouldn't need probiotics. But unfortunately, with the way that our society is right now, we're very much germaphobes, which means that we're not getting our hands in the dirt. We're not actually exposing ourselves to microbes on a routine basis. And also, we're a lot of times not eating foods that increase our diversity of microbes in general. And so probiotics, though, are actually a way to increase that. Basically, what a probiotic is almost always a lactic acid forming organism that is transient. So it means that it's only in your body for a very short amount of time. So for instance, if you're to take Lactobacillus acidophilus, which is a common probiotic that we actually have in Ample as well, that culture would actually only be in your large intestine for about 7 days or so. And then after that, it basically passes through. But what's interesting is that it actually changes the environment of your microbiome to decrease things like IBS and improve digestion in general. And a lot of this is actually still being studied. What's interesting is that we know that probiotics work to improve the diversity of the gut microbiome and reduce symptoms of gastrointestinal issues. But the mechanisms are still being studied, and I'm very much excited to see the science and also be in close contact with those PhDs who are doing this research. But when we were creating our probiotic blend, what was important to me is that because Ample is in a powder and it's not in a capsule form, what's important is that we have both enough probiotics, i.e. we actually have about 10 times more probiotics than is in kombucha, but also they're robust in that they actually make it all the way through to your large intestine, and they don't just get killed off in the stomach because it's a very acidic environment. So this is why we have these 6 strains, and I'll just list them off real quick in case any of them are interesting to people. But there's lactobacillus.
Yeah, and before you go into that, I mean, that's just such a key point for our listeners who, kind of this new thing, kombucha. Kombucha has been around for a long, long time. Just ask people, if you're in the U.S., ask people overseas. I mean, they've been dealing with this for a long time in, Asia and other places like that. But it's just kind of this newer thing, around here. But that's the thing is you hear about these things that can be great for you. You hear about these strains, you hear about these, millions of bacteria you're putting in your body, but they're not high quality. And I've done a ton of reading on that where a lot of them just don't even make their way through to the key parts of your body that they're supposed to because they end up getting killed off with the acid, as you just mentioned, or other things. And I think what really, the question I'd posed earlier was what really sets your drink apart as you're coming to the market with it here and expecting people to really take notice of it because of the work you've put into it. I mean, everything that you're mentioning, all these little key steps are what really make Ample set apart from everything else. And just so glad I had a chance to get you on here as well. So I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I mean, just listeners just key into this because there's so many things that Connor's mentioning that other drinks can claim similar things or other supplements can claim similar things. But when you really break down into the fine print or the fine details of what's going on, there's been a ton of research behind this to really get the right things into this drink.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate you noticing the details because the details are the ones that matter. So we have Lactobacillus acidophilus, also Lactobacillus paracasei, and then also Bifidobacterium. So Bifidobacterium lactis infantis, and then Lactobacillus rhamnosus. And then the last one is actually, I would say, the most exciting. Most people haven't heard of Bacillus or like Bacillus coagulans. But what's interesting about this particular probiotic strain is that it's spore forming, which basically means that it is incredibly robust in the sense that it actually makes its way completely through the stomach and can handle the most acidic environments with ease, so that like all of the CFUs that we have in it, which is 3 billion CFUs of Bacillus coagulans, are all basically seated in the large intestine, so it's actually able to work really well. So I'm very excited about that one. And although, it's one of those things where it costs 5 times more than any of the other probiotics combined. And most people don't even know the name of it, but I'm like, we still need that in there because it's not about seeming healthy. It's actually about being healthy. And if we have probiotics, I really want to make sure that they work rather than to just say them so you can have them look good on a label.
Yeah, I was going to mention that point a little bit earlier of a lot of this stuff that you're doing, you're having to go the extra mile, both in production and just in thinking through what people who do know the details and people who are going to get on board with this to help promote what you're doing. A lot of people out there, as you just mentioned, aren't going to know, or sometimes maybe not even care. When you don't know, you don't care, right? You're not aware of what you should be caring about when it comes to your body and health and things like that. You're having to do so much more in the process of this that's costing you more, that's costing, the margins are probably less because of this, because you can only sell a drink for a certain cost before people stop buying it, even if it's the greatest thing out there, right? So as I'm sitting here listening to these awesome ingredients and the formulation behind it, is the people who really do know about this stuff, those are going to be your champions and the ones that are going to help get the news about this out, guys like Mark Devine and people like that, right? And others that are really going to help hopefully make all of that production time and effort pay off because they know it's the right thing that we should be putting in our bodies.
I totally agree with you, and I appreciate you saying that. Ample itself is not done yet. So, there's things that I want to be able to change and improve about this formula right now that, are going to be, changed and improved over the next, couple of years. As I mentioned before, we don't know everything in science yet. So, as we find out more information, for instance, specifically about the gut microbiome, we're going to be iterating and adapting our formula to reflect those changes. Yes, Ample I'm very convinced that it's the best thing on the market right now, but it's certainly not the best thing that could create it ever. So I am very excited. And it's almost unfortunate because now I'm in some respects not actually all that great at selling Ample anymore, because I'm like, yeah, well, we could be doing this and that and the other thing, and to make the thing better. But I think you're right in the sense that we have taken care to make the best thing that's out on the market, and it's only going to get better. So I really appreciate your acknowledging that.
To me, there's nothing like this out there. You've mentioned that a couple of times, and sure, people can say that, people can claim that, but then you find 25 other variations similar to that thing, right? Based on your ingredients, based on the processing of it, this is just something I'm really excited about and something I think is going to help a tremendous amount of people out there, and why I'm so glad we got you on the podcast to really dive into it deeper.
I'm super thankful for being on your podcast and having you invite me. I'd love to, be able to give your listeners a promo code as well. So
that'd be awesome. Thanks so much.
Yeah, so we'll create a promo called Success 101, and then that'll actually allow anyone to get 15% off their first order.
Awesome.
.com. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for that. I'm always looking for great people to bring on, but whenever they can provide even more value for the listeners, that's what we're all about here. So thanks so much for that.
Heck yeah, man.
You've got a 400 calorie bottle. You've got a 600 calorie bottle. And again, I would just encourage you guys listening out there, go to amplemeal.com. You can look about the product, the nutrition specs on it, and then order yours now. So as I mentioned, there's a 400 and a 600. What would you recommend for most people out there? Is it the type of deal where the 400 is just for your everyday person, maybe going to an office environment, trying to stay healthy, whatever, and then the 600 is more for people who are a little bit more active, like you'd mentioned CrossFit, those sort of things? Help me gauge what people should be ordering here if they decide to go place an order.
Sure. So I generally suggest that it's both an activity level as well as a size. A lot of times, and potentially your audience may actually already do a little bit of nutrient tracking in terms of understanding how large their general meals are. So it usually depends on what is the meal that you're trying to get here. So some people use Ample to replace another meal. So for instance, if they know that they don't have time to make a healthy breakfast, and sit down and eat it, they're going to grab an Ample and go. Or if they're super busy, they thought they were going to have time for lunch today, but meeting, back-to-back meetings or traveling or they're on the road, they just have to grab an Ample and go. It depends on what they're actually, replacing it for. So I would suggest kind of thinking about it. Am I going to use this for breakfast? Am I going to use this for lunch or maybe a mid-afternoon meal? Or am I going to use it post-workout? And generally, if you want a rule of thumb, if you're generally over, 150, 160 pounds, I've found that people have, they gravitate more towards the 600 calorie version. If they're under that amount of weight, they generally gravitate towards a 400. And of course, you can use it as well for a calorie booster. Some people, I've got a lot of friends who are basically CrossFit athletes, or they're just consuming so many, or even NFL or NHL guys who they're just consuming so many calories, but they need to make sure that the calories that they do have are actually quality. And so it's just so aggravating for them. So, it's like you're doing hours of meal prep every Sunday, and then you still might not even have enough food to last through the week. And so this is that thing that allows you to get through the week in a healthy way that doesn't sap all of your time.
What do you see? I know there's some things you probably can't mention, as most people who are trying to do a lot of research on things can't do, but is there anything just on the horizon for you guys? Most entrepreneurs that I know, they've got that itch, they've got that fever, and some people are trying to tell them to slow down a little bit. But once they create something and it's good and it works, it's like, okay, where can we take this next? Is there anything on the horizon that you can mention? Totally okay if you can't.
Yeah.
The company's going toward are really going to be out there to help people with nutrition and peak performance.
Totally. So I guess I'll start with the mission of the company, which is basically to help someone optimize their diet. And so what that means is, of course, we have products, we have a physical product, but I want Ample to be seen as a tool rather than just the be all and end all. And part of it is to teach people to fish rather than give them a fish. And so, of course, we have these products. We have Ample that's coming out right now, or that is already out. We have Ample V, which is a vegan version that'll come out actually just in a couple of weeks. So it's quite likely that by the time this podcast is out, Ample V will be out, which is this vegan version. We're also working on another couple of versions as well. That we're working on a ketogenic version of Ample as well. And now that's still several months away, so I wouldn't get your hopes up, quite yet. But working on a ketogenic version.
I'm starting to get excited, man. You got me all fired up when you mentioned that.
Otherwise I'm going to promise a date, and then people are going to be like, "What's going on?" And so, just hold your horses. I'm really, I promise, I'm the most excited for anyone, and I can't wait till it's done. But food is one of those things where you don't want to mess around with. You don't want to mess around doing something that's suboptimal. We're about optimal performance, optimal nutrition. So we're not going to put out a product that's not freaking fantastic. And it takes time, especially to get the ingredients that we need to and have custom blends of all of our fats. This is really difficult. And so
I can imagine.
Yeah, it's not easy. But a couple of the things on the tool perspective. But of course, my whole philosophy is that I want to help someone level up their life entirely. And that means, yes, giving them an Ample, but also teaching them the fundamental reasons why we put the things that we did in Ample, because they can use this same knowledge to actually optimize the rest of their diet. Because, once again, if someone understands the fundamental biology, then having an optimal diet follows almost naturally, almost as a byproduct, because you know how the body works. So restarting a podcast actually that I used to have, and then also doing some nutritional content, that's going to be exciting. That's where I think where the brand and the education side of things is really going to heat up. And I'm really excited for that, because I just know how important it is to give people the whys rather than just, the here, go take this and be happy.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to have that backing behind it as well, or it won't make sense, or it'll fizzle out or whatever. There's got to be some meat behind it. And I think that's what you're going to be providing with that. Awesome. Well, Connor, we wish you the best. And thanks so much for spending time with my listeners here. We'll be looking out for new things that you guys are developing. And thanks for your time on the Success 101 podcast. Take care, buddy.
Thanks so much, Jared.
Hey guys, I enjoyed having Connor on the podcast today and hope you go grab your own order of Ample Meal. Again, at success101podcast.com/Ample, and at checkout, don't forget to put code Success101 to get your 15% off. If you'd like to connect directly with me, you can do that by email at info@success101podcast.com, or in the world of social media on Facebook at the Success 101 Podcast Facebook page, or on Instagram at Success 101 Podcast. I'll catch you guys on the next amazing episode and hope you continue to rock 2017 on to higher levels of peak performance.